Welcome to another edition of our Six Questions podcast. I'm Trent England. Thank you so much for being here with us as we start the new year 2023. Some big fights over the Electoral College and our election systems, but also some interesting things going on in places like Davos. We're going to talk about that and other topics today with Michael Bastasch. He is the managing editor of the Daily Caller, a great journalist reporting on things in Washington, D.C. and around the country and around the world. Michael, welcome to Six Questions.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on, Trent.
So, first of all, simple question. You're the managing editor at the Daily Caller. What role does a media organization like the Daily Caller play in bringing balance to the media landscape and just put in a good plug for the Daily Caller because you guys do great work?
Yeah, so I'm the managing editor of the Daily Caller News Foundation, which is the nonprofit organization that's the sister org of the Daily Caller. And what we do is, we do original reporting and investigative reporting, and we also have a journalism training program. So we train young journalists, arm them with the tools to be the best in the biz, and then they usually get hired by other places from, everything from we've had people go to the New York Times, Fox, CBS, all over the media landscape. It just speaks to the quality of our training program here. But aside from the training program, reporting wise, where we fit in is we're just covering stories that a lot of people in the legacy media, I don't call them mainstream media anymore because frankly, we're mainstream. We have millions of readers. People really like our stuff. So the legacy media, the corporate media, we cover the stories that they don't want to cover. And we also and we're not just covering what they want to cover. We find the gaps in their coverage. And we look to see, especially how is their spin on the story, the honest. Are they being honest? Are they being truthful? Are they representing the whole picture of what's going on? And frankly, it's been a great niche for us. We also do our own enterprise reporting and obviously cover breaking news, much like every other outlet out there to stay competitive. But yeah, I think that a big reason people come and read us is because they know they're getting news that not the mainstream media, the corporate media is not telling them. And that's been a big selling point for why people come to our site.
Yeah. I think there's maybe no area in media that is, when it comes to the legacy media, at least, more skewed than climate change, which is a big focus of your writing. So where did that interest come from, and what's it like being somebody on the, conservative and, in terms of media, just sort of balanced side of things, who's writing about an issue that gets so skewed toward the alarmist side?
It is really, and each year it becomes more and more skewed to the point where it's just, you look at the reporting and you're being misled about what the science actually says. I started doing this a little over a decade ago. My boss asked me. I had no experience in energy or climate. I was a political science major in college. I had just started journalism. He asked, fracking's becoming a big deal. Do you want to cover energy for us? And so it kind of started with that. And the more I covered, the more I realized that climate was the thread that underpinned all of the left's energy policies. That was the centerpiece. It was all about the climate and cutting emissions and ending fossil fuel use in the United States and also globally, which is, the goal of the creatures that inhabit Davos. And so from that, I just started to think, well, I should really look into the science and see what it's actually saying. And the more I looked and the more I talked to scientists, of all persuasions, the more I realized that the left is pushing this needless alarmism where, the science doesn't really justify it. And the where you see it the most is on with extreme weather. Every weather event is quote unquote made worse by climate change, or has the fingerprints of climate change on it, or is a harbinger of what's to come. It's and the fundamental fact is, with or without climate change, bad weather will still occur, and you will still get worse events than we get today. Um, but what they don't tell you is that over the last 100 years, we've become massively resilient to extreme weather. The extreme weather damage from like hurricanes and other extreme weather events, extreme climate events, has, as a percentage of our GDP, has gone way down. So we're building more, we're wealthier, we're healthier, and we're taking less damage from storms and other violent climate events. Also, the number of people dying globally, this is true in the United States and globally, has gone down something like 90+%. So the climate is, despite all the hype about, the weather is getting more extreme, we seem to be getting safer. So there is a massive disconnect in, what they're saying, the narrative they're spinning, and versus the reality. You're much less likely to die of a storm or a flood today than you were 50, 100 years ago. It's just, you read about these old floods and, out west, or even on the East Coast, where thousands of people would die, hundreds of people would die. That, if that happened today, that would be an anomaly. That would be like, people would be prosecuted for that kind of thing. It would be the biggest story of the year. But it really doesn't. Unfortunately, people still do die, and we should take extreme weather events very seriously, and we do. And our ability to anticipate them has grown a lot, which from forecasting, which is one of the reasons we're so resilient. So that's just one example of, kind of the disconnect between what the corporate media is reporting and what the actual science and the historical trends have shown.
So connected to that, question number 3, Michael, the World Economic Forum at Davos is going on right now as we record this. What effect do they have on climate policy, particularly in the US? I mean, is it something to worry about, or are these just, is this just a bunch of hot air?
I think it is something to worry about, in the sense that this is where they come together, gather every year to put their heads together to find out how to make energy more expensive for the rest of us and reduce our standard of living. I think that it is important to pay attention what happens and was talked about at Davos. It's not always super surprising what they talk about. You have John Kerry goes there and he talks about how great China is and how the US needs to reduce its emissions. That's what he always does. That's what we expect. They make big policy announcements there. But the big thing is like listening to the CEOs talk about what they're doing in terms of ESG, which is, environment, social and governance investing, which is why you get a lot of banks and pension funds and investors like BlackRock trying to divert capital away from the oil and gas industry and towards renewables. I think it's important to pay attention to what happens there, because what they discuss inevitably trickles down to policymaking in the United States. So they're not always the catalyst of all the ideas, but they're a forum for them to come, put their heads together, brainstorm, build consensus about what needs to be done, and then send their little Davos minions back on their private jets, back to their countries where they can implement these policies. And so, you saw in terms of, I don't know if you remember this story, but the Dutch government basically implementing policies that would put thousands of farms, that would force thousands of farmers out of business. It caused massive protests across Europe. As farmers across Europe showed solidarity with the Dutch. They were dumping spraying manure on the Capitol, and dumping manure onto highways. And parking their tractors in to cause massive roadblocks, because they were pissed, and they had every right to be. A lot of those ideas about reducing emissions from farming, had their genesis at places like Davos, and the United Nations and these international forums.
Yeah. So question number 4 here, Michael. One thing that we see in the US is that in pursuit of some of these climate policies, based on this alarmism, if we don't get this done, we're all going to die. We see a lot of attacks on the Constitution, on things like the Supreme Court, the Senate, the Electoral College, obviously close to our heart here at Save Our States. What do you think about all of that? I'm always curious. Do the folks making those claims, do they really believe it, or is it just sort of the same folks who are trying to tear down our Constitution anyway? Or maybe there's sort of common cause. This is a way for the left to kind of build their coalition. You got the climate folks and the folks who want to radically alter our constitutional structure, sort of coming together, saying we all agree that we should tear these institutions down. What do you think about all that?
I definitely think they're working in common cause with a lot of these other groups that, the usual suspects that you'd expect. You hear they repeat a lot of the talking points on when it comes to any of our institutions, from the courts to the Electoral College, about how they're racist institutions, yada, 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 unfair, they, not real democracy, whatever else they want to, whatever the talking points are. I think for the environmental movement, what they've been very good at doing is finding the weaknesses in our system and exploiting them to get their policies passed. If you remember in the Obamacare debate, Pelosi said, if we can't get over the fence, we're going to go under the fence. We're going to go. So that's what they do. So if they can't get their policies through the legislature, they wait until they have a friendly executive. So in this case, President Biden, and they go through the regulatory system. And if they can't get through the regulatory system, they try to use the courts. Now, the courts have been particularly unfriendly in terms of a lot of the climate policies they want to get passed, because, shocker, they contravene our laws in the United States. And so the Supreme Court stopped the EPA's Clean Power Plan. There's this lawsuit going around where environmentalists rounded up a bunch of kids who are claiming they have a right to a stable climate. And I'm sure you heard about it.
Yeah.
They're exploiting kids who are, weirdly, the kids aren't even kids anymore. They're all like adults because it's been going on for so long. And they're trying to get the courts to say, yeah, you have a right to a stable climate. And they can't even get the Ninth Circuit to say it. So if that's the case, then you're probably not going to have much success.
Yeah, if you're on the left and you've lost the Ninth Circuit, you've got nowhere else to
go. Even liberal justices, I think, aren't going to go that step because they realize this would be a massive upending of our system of government. I think even a lot of the leftist jurists aren't there to, they're there to, in some cases rubber stamp leftist policies, but they're not there to completely undermine the judiciary and overhaul the system in a way that would, neuter the legislature and things like that.
Yeah. And I wonder too, with folks on the left, I think I find this with some of my friends who are more on that side, that, like with things like CRT or some of these other weird cultural issues where a lot of the people on the left, like they won't disagree with the zeitgeist, but personally, privately, they think some of these folks are going too far. And I wonder if you get that on climate, where even some of these justices and folks who we might disagree with, 9 times out of 10, they still recognize that some of this climate alarmism is really pushing policies that are more harmful than good, even if the premises are right. I think let me jump to our question number 5. This shifting gears a little bit, we see ranked choice voting spreading around the country, a huge push for this. And, part of the strategy, I think, at least in some of the Northeast states, has related to sort of using Green Party, far left parties as ways to get out the vote for Democratic candidates. But we also see a lot of opposition to RCV. What do you think about this system, and why? I mean, do you have a theory on why we see this being pushed so hard right now?
Yeah, I do. It's because RCV, ranked choice voting, is how you keep minority parties and upstart candidates from winning races. So, you have the system in Alaska where, Lisa Murkowski can still win an election despite, not getting the most votes So, it's a system that's spreading. You see it spreading, it's particularly in liberal states. And it's a place where in liberal states, they see it as a way to make sure Republicans never get elected, or the wrong Republicans.
Yeah.
That's kind of my theory. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit, but
well, they certainly flipped a congressional seat in Maine from R to D, and as you say, they altered the outcome in Alaska. So I mean, it certainly looks like they're achieving some of that. Michael, our final question on Six Questions is always the same for first-time guests. We're so glad to have you here. The question is, who is your favorite founding father and why?
I was reading that question and I was like, man, this is actually a tough one because there are so many good ones to choose from. I would just have to go with the one of the obvious ones. I think my favorite has always been Thomas Jefferson because one, the primary author of the Declaration of Independence. I think it's really hard to beat that. There is no other document that sums up what America is about than that document, at least the preamble in a lot of ways. And those words are so powerful and they've affected so many other. I don't think there really is a document that is another document besides maybe Magna Carta and some of these other ones that is so foundational that like other governments, other revolutionary governments from communists to like right-wing governments have used those words as like a foundational principle of their governments. Now, obviously the communist governments have a lot of evil things, but you'll see like even leftist governments will like sometimes cite Jefferson.
Yeah.
And at least that preamble part, because it's so powerful and it's such a powerful idea. I don't think any of our other founders have had that sort of impact on the world.
Yeah.
At least, aside from founding the United States, of course.
Yeah.
Which is, the most powerful, freest country to ever exist. And I've always liked, I like a lot. I like Washington a lot.
Yeah.
I even like John Adams. I know he sometimes gets a bad rap in conservative circles, but I think he's great.
Well, I think if you live by the pen, right, it's hard to go wrong with Jefferson.
Right.
I mean, just going through his writings and the breadth of his writings, not to mention the depth of his writings. I mean, it's amazing. The thing, he was sort of, I don't know. I always think he compares, to some of the Greeks who, people know Aristotle because of his philosophy, but he wrote about natural history and all kinds of other things that, and Jefferson is like that. I mean, he's out there trying to understand agriculture and natural history and all these other things at the same time he's creating a country.
Yeah. And, he invented the swivel chair, guys. Yeah. The swivel chair. He's such a like polymath and such a smart person. He's truly like one of those really impressive people who was a total hypocrite in a lot of things. And that's kind of what makes him interesting too, is he had these brilliant ideas and about how people should live, how government should be run. And personally, he did not abide by a lot of them. He was perpetually in debt. He said all men are created equal, but he owned slaves. And, he was a great inventor and like lover of fine French wines. And, and he like in government, he championed frugality and fiscal conservatism and like strong currencies and sound money. And he was, profligate spender, just, personally. And, he was, he didn't like, and, he was like a very canny politician. He was always kind of working behind the scenes, and him and James Madison are a pretty fascinating pair. Yeah. And they basically were like, a founding principle of America was like, or, one of the things is like, well, we shouldn't have like political parties. And then what do they do is they go create the first political party.
And hire opposition researchers.
And they put out like, propaganda papers and all this stuff. It's just like they're just fascinating. Like him, and I think Madison is probably my second, but they're
Yeah.
both just really fascinating people.
Yeah.
You know what? They all are. They all are.
Absolutely. Well, Michael, share with folks as we wrap up here how they can stay in touch with the Daily Caller News Foundation and the Daily Caller in your work.
Yeah. So you can follow me on Twitter. My handle is super easy. It's just at Mike Bastasch. I don't write as much as I used to because I'm running the newsroom here, but I definitely try to keep up. All our work is, we are a newswire service, so all our work is published on thedailycaller.com, which you can see. We also, a lot of it is published on thedailysignal.com and various other websites. And if you want to come directly to our website, you can go to dailycolornewsfoundation.org.
Very good. Michael Bastasch, thank you for being a part of our 6 questions, managing editor at the Daily News at the Daily Caller News Foundation. I'll get all that right eventually. Thank you so much for being on 6 questions.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
And thanks to all of you for watching or listening. Remember to give us a rating, share your thoughts with us, and connect with Save Our States either through our Facebook page or our Facebook group. If you want to get more involved, that's where we organize people to really reach out, contact state legislators in particular. We also do that over email. You can sign up and get a lot more information at saveourstates.com. Until next time, I'm Trent England. Thanks for watching.